Schwarzkopf on Victorian Clothes, and you can see them around me. And they've done a lot of work, so I'm sure it will be a very excellent program. I want to announce upcoming events that the museum is doing. Next Sunday, July 27th at 2 p.m., we're going to be at Warm Wishes. We're going to have Letters from Home, which is a letter writing event. There's going to be a very short program. It won't take too long. And then we've got stationery, and you're all invited to write a letter, and we've got stamps, and we can mail them for you, or you can mail them yourselves, and it's a chance to basically write your own history, because letters are a form of history, either because of the people that you get them from that mean something to you and to them, or because historians use them for research in the future. So you don't know where your letter is going. August 1st, we're going to have an event called Fires of Jefferson's Past at the First United Methodist Church. It's a noon lunch, so if you want to come to that, you need to RSVP also. It's Rolf Blass, Jed McGee, Eldon Cunningham, and David John. And they're going to talk about fires of Jefferson's past. And it should be a good program. David John has wanted to do a program on that for years, and he's finally got it to happening. August 2nd, we're going to have Thomas Lane here. That's a Saturday morning at 10:30. And he's going to talk, or at 10, and he's going to talk about the history of eminent domain. And so there was a bill in the Iowa legislature that some of you may be familiar with, and he, I think, basically wrote that bill, but he knows a lot about it, and he will be glad to talk to us about the history of eminent domain. It's a short program. It should only be 20 minutes or so, and we're going to have coffee and food, and we'll pull tables out here and just sit around tables, and it should be just a nice chance to have a conversation and to learn something. August, I'll talk about August 1st. August 17th, we're having Working with the Enemy, which is a program by Chad Tim from Simpson College on the prisoner of war camps in Iowa during World War II. And that's a Sunday program here at the museum. And then what I was trying to announce, and got ahead of myself, is September 21st, Dianne Piepel, who is today's presenter, is doing another cemetery walk. So we're having a cemetery walk at the Jefferson Cemetery September 21st. The rain date is September 28th. So that's all my announcements. I want to make one last announcement because Jed McGee is the secretary of our board, and he is invaluable to the Historical Society. He does so much, and we all rely on him for a great deal. And today is Jed's birthday. Jed didn't know I was going to do this, so we'll hope he's not too offended. But I think we should all sing happy birthday together. So I'm going to start, and I'm a very poor singer, so I'm really counting on you all to join it. Happy birthday to you, happy birthday to you, happy birthday dear Jen, happy birthday to you.
They're surrounded by your lovely ladies.
And now I will introduce Mikki Schwarzkopf and Dianne Piepel.
Welcome everybody to the 19th century. And to get us into the Victorian mood, please welcome our model, Carol Ehrenholz. She is demonstrating how to use our first item, an elegant silk parasol used by Mrs. Joseph Head. And I'm sure those ruffles were all aflutter when Mrs. Head sashayed on Jefferson streets. Thank you, Carol. Well, after months and months of research, Dianne will let you know about the people who wore the clothing, and I'll talk about the fabrics and the styles. So please hold your questions to the end, or we will get all discombobulated. But afterwards, feel free to come up for a closer look at what your great-grandmothers wore before you take off. Well, the first thing you'll notice is that almost everything is black, black, black. Why? Well, yes, Victorians wore a lot of black, and not only because Queen Victoria mourned her husband's death for many years. Death came to much younger people, adults and children in the 19th century, so people were often in mourning, And black was also practical. It didn't show dirt or stains. And if an outfit started out looking shabby, they dyed it black to renew it. And in addition, the dyes of the time were mostly made from natural materials, berries and bark and so on, and they just didn't provide very vivid colors. Younger people wore lighter colors, but mature women were expected to wear darker ones. And as we go through these items, you'll notice that many things have extra fancy buttons and lace and sparkles. But the Ladies' Home Journal scolded them. My dear woman, jet beads and ribbons and decoration are certainly not permitted during mourning. They are in extremely bad taste during this period. And by way of explanation, jet beads were made from a byproduct of coal, and it made them black and very shiny. And it also has to be noted that fine clothing was never washed. Dry cleaning had not made it to the Midwest yet, so these were all spot cleaned with vodka or kerosene. But I will turn this over to Dianne to tell you about the head family garments on our first panel over here.
Well, everything on this panel was donated by a member of the Head family. And her name was Catherine Greiser. And I will tell you a little bit about her parents in just a moment. But first about Ellen Head. She came to Jefferson in 1873 with her husband Joseph. Joseph was a brother to Albert and Navon Head, who were business and civic leaders here in Jefferson. He was in the abstract and mercantile business. They lived on a farm within the city limits and raised livestock. They had 8 children. Ellen was a religious woman. She attended church, and she enjoyed reading and had a keen interest in public affairs. She loved the Jefferson Chautauqua. One of her daughters was named Olive. Olive married James Smith. He was a salesman at Smith and Ragnar, and he sold men's clothes. The store was located where the Hoyt Law Office is today. The Smiths had a daughter named Bonnie, who married John Greiser. And I have pictures of Bonnie. Notice in this picture, she is wearing quite a neat hat with ostrich feathers.
We'll pass this
And
around.
these are from around 1900. In this one, you'll notice her hairdo. She's wearing short, fringy bangs, which were characteristic of that time frame. Well, her husband John was also in the mercantile business with his father L.J. and brother William Greiser. In 1907, they married in the home of her aunt and uncle W.S. McCullough. We have John's mourning suit on display here that he was married in. And Bonnie was attired in a white lace gown with a long 12 veil and carried white roses. Her grandfather Joseph gave her away, as both her parents had already died. Before her marriage, she was a kindergarten teacher here in Jefferson. Well, Bonnie and John had twin daughters, Gertrude and Catherine, and as I said, Catherine was the one that donated these items to the museum. Now Mikki will talk about the items on this panel.
Okay, this man's mourning suit, this is the only man's item we have. I think they just wore their clothes to death like they do now, you know? But it was a mourning suit worn for his daytime wedding, satin lapels, and most weddings were held in the morning back then. Notice that this is waist length in front, but with long tails in the back. It was always handy if a man needed to ride horseback to formal events, you know. Men's shirts always had separate collars, and they fastened to the shirt band with buttons or studs. Well, these high collars were always starched to death. Doesn't sound very comfortable. Men wore a clean collar every day, but they wore the same shirt sometimes for weeks without being washed. Laundry was such a huge job that these separate collars helped a lot. And they were often made of celluloid, the first kind of plastic, which could be wiped clean instead of laundered. Men's shirts, I thought this was interesting, men's shirts were considered to be underclothes, and it was improper to show their shirts. And the man always wore a vest. The next thing is a cream cape, which is silk. It's woven of 2 different widths of silk braid and features a braided belt with tassels. This woven shawl may not look very fancy, but it had an interesting history. Mrs. Head wove it. She didn't weave it. She wore it to the centennial celebration in Philadelphia for our 100th anniversary of our country. This cut velvet cape was also Mrs. Head's, and it features velvet fringe. And cut velvet was extremely expensive to make. So there are flowers that advance from the fabric, and then the back is just plain. The silk blouse underneath has double layers of black lace at the shoulders and pleated cuffs, and it features many detailed jet buttons. The jacket and the skirt, well, Mrs. Head had to really draw attention when she wore this outfit. The jacket has a tan silk bodice and cuffs overlaid with figured lace. The beads were very elaborate, a large bead surrounded by small beads in a flower to make a flower pattern. Well, collars were almost always separate, and they were extremely high. And the Ladies' Home Journal declared to permit one's neck to show in the daytime is extremely bad form. The skirt was an unusual net design. Kind of show it, sort of. It's called inlaid applique. You could come up later and have a look. It has satin cutouts sewn underneath the netting, which just sounds incredible to me. The last thing we have is a hoop skirt. Well, hoop skirts were very popular for many decades. They were cheap and they held dresses away from the butt legs without having to wear layers of hot petticoats. This wire hoop skirt is typical of the 1890s, and it's narrower in diameter than the early ones, but it still has a bustle effect in the back to make one's backside look bigger, and a bustle pad over the top that you tied around your waist so that the wires wouldn't show under your dress. But women still had to twist their backs in order to sit down. A Boston doctor wrote, "Of all the incomprehensible deformities, the bustle is the worst." And I'll turn it over to Dianne, who is going to talk about all the milliners in Jefferson who created lots of hats and clothes and all kinds of things.
That's right, thank you. Okay, well, as far back as the 1860s, there were milliners in Jefferson. In 1866, Minerva Jenkins set up a room in the Jefferson House Hotel, which was located where the Lincoln Building is today. And she sold goods brought in from the East in the latest styles. Later that year, Minerva married Albert Head in that same hotel. Another shop was set up where the Baptist church used to be, and now is Homestay parking lot. Emma Wincoop advertised she had the largest, the latest, and the best assortment of millinery goods. By 1872, Mrs. Blair and Mrs. Steffens offered a large stock of goods in the latest styles, and they were situated where the Bee and Herald used to be. Mrs. Hill opened her dressmaking establishment in the southwest corner of the square. Well, in the 1880s, there were several millinery groups of stores uptown, and men's stores were opening. In 1881, L.J. Greiser opened the Mammoth store on the south side of the square where Sensibly Chic is today. And I had an advertisement. He would advertise every week in the paper, and he said his Mammoth store was a large new building. So this ad was from 1881. He later moved to the west side of the square on the ground floor of the Columbian building and named his store the L.J. Greiser Company. And it was there until 1927. I have a picture of that. It's a nice picture of the Columbian building. Well, he carried such things as flannel and underwear. Another well-known men's store opened called Oppenheimer's. And I have a picture of that ad. And then this is from November 1889. It says, "High prices, cut to pieces, great slaughter sale." Well, eventually that store became Oppenheimer and Durham, and then Durham and Durham. And I have a picture of Julius and Chester Oppenheimer and my uncle, Lauren Durham. And I happen to have some Durham relatives here today, so I thought this was a fitting